We're going to check to make sure that we are streaming in the right places.
Actually, let me just take a quick look.
We're live.
Okay.
If you need it, we're behind the blue curtain, but
I think I upgraded Audacity, and I don't know if I'm on the right micro. It just doesn't actually say what microphone I'm on right now.
it should say which microphone you're on. There's like a bar for it. It's like the input chooser.
I think I'm just gonna trust that it's right.
Go for it. Worst to worst, I use the video. I use the audio for the stream. So hold on, I do need to adjust the window a little bit though. All right, and we hit this button. Hello, and welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
and I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Fast 9, the Fast Saga. Before we do that, Buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Oh, on this podcast, we're gonna see Fast 10 in 2 days. I bought my ticket last night. It honestly didn't hit me until how close. It's 2 days. 2 days away.
Yeah, although apparently it's one of 3.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Oh my god. Yeah, I don't know. It's great. I don't think I've been this hyped for a movie. Honestly, I don't think I've been this hyped for a movie since F9 came out 2 years ago. Like I just this series of movies. What a franchise. Okay.
All right. So I said this to Buddy before we started, but I'm gonna rush us through the pre-spoilers. You're gonna get a spoiler warning on this because this is a recent enough movie, right?
Yeah.
But there's some spoilers that I want to talk about.
Going into it unspoiled is great. I would recommend it, honestly.
All right, so let's give our pre-spoiler opinions. Buddy, I know you like this movie a lot, yes?
I would have normally said that Fast 5 is the best one, but I'm lying. F9 is the best one. It's my favorite. It is the culmination of all of these things. It's the kind of movie that like Avengers was, right? Or Infinity War, or honestly Fast 5 was, right? In the sense that it requires a certain amount of buy-in. You have to kind of understand the lore. You have to understand the characters, their relationships with one another. But if you walk into this movie with that context, it's a transcendent experience. At least it is for me. Famously, I cried 7 times when I saw it in theaters. I listed each of the 7 times. I don't remember. I'm trying to go back and find that tweet from however long ago. But I cried just watching it last night. What a picture. This is what movies are made for, Mango. That's my take.
I am slightly less hot on this movie, to put it so be clear. I think this is a perfectly fine movie. It has done this thing for me that a lot of these movies have done, which is in the beginning, I start to not quite like it, but then it turns me around by the end of it. I think part of that too is that I'm coming into this as the penultimate movie, right? Or at least the penultimate chapter, let's say, since again, we're getting 3 more of these apparently to finish out Fast X, which is fine. But some of the stuff in the beginning worried me a little bit. But it quickly turned itself around, and I very much enjoyed the movie. I still think I like Fast 6 the best.
Okay, sure.
Again, with my caveat that of the modern Fast and Furious movies, I think Fast 6 is the best so far. And of the what I'm going to call the classic ones, which is a weird way to put it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think Tokyo Drift is still my favorite Fast and Furious movie, as I intuit the original series was intended.
So we're kind of cutting off at 4, right? Between 4 and 5 is when they kind of jump into this next level. Yeah. Honestly, between 5 and 6 is maybe when I would say. In 5, they are doing crazy stunts, but at the end of the day, they're still being criminals. They're robbing a bank.
Well, it's not necessarily the hero stuff. It's the kind of ludicrousness, right? And I think 4 is the transition movie there, right?
Yeah.
Right, even though they are crazy, even though things in 1, 2, and 3 are pretty crazy, they're still a thought that maybe this could be real. That kind of goes out the window.
There is the DNA of crime thriller in 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
But the DNA kind of gets mutated between 4 and 5 to, you know, over the top action movie, right?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm on board. Yep.
All right. So here's your spoiler warning. There's a big spoiler that I'm going to immediately talk about past the spoiler warning. So if you care to be unspoiled about F9, the Fast Saga, stop now. All right. So here it is, right? There's this scene in the movie where it's Letty and Mia, I believe, are in Japan, and they see the Mexican flag, and this is meaningful, right? And there's a fight scene, right? And at the end of the fight scene, our heroes are on their back feet, but then a sniper takes out 3 of them. And I think to myself as this is happening, this is the thing I predicted. This is the thing where Giselle, we didn't see her die, so this is Giselle, right? But I forgot. This is fucking Fast and Furious, right? There's no twists. Everything is played as straight and stupid as possible. It's fucking Han! How the fuck?
He's alive.
Nothing is fucking sacred. Like, I have, like, off the backs of this, I have some stuff to talk about for 10 that we'll get to. But, you know, it's just, what, there is some stuff in this movie, like, I think the magnets are fucking stupid. Just because, like, they have a level of unreality to them that, like, doesn't even, like, work.
Oh, come on. Really? Okay, well, that's fine.
No. It's not that magnets that strong exist. It's that they work exactly as the plot wants them to, not like a theoretically strong.
They magnet into the truck the car from like a million miles away. And it's like the cube. What is it? The cube something rule would like. How on earth would that ever work?
So it's not even that aspect, right? It's like the cube they pull the car in, but like nothing else on the block is affected, right? Like it affects things as the plot wants it to, right?
Yes.
And like, you know, I don't require realism, but I do like a little bit of internal consistency, right? But again, it doesn't bother me that much. I understand. Like I am much more forgiving of the space stuff here because, like, you know, they can do space, right? Like, you know, I believe that they can do space, and the space stuff itself, consistent, right? Like, I believe that fucking Roman and Tej boarded the ISS and came back down to Earth at the end of this movie, right?
Yep.
That stuff doesn't bother me like the magnet stuff. But, right, like, this movie is fucking bananas, right? Because, like, Han coming back means that absolutely nothing is sacred at all. Right, like,
God,
at all. Is this when you cried? Is this one of the times when you cried when it was Han?
You know what? I need to pull up this tweet. I will search for this tweet. Absolutely, one of the times I cried. A lot of my crying was related to Han. I'm pretty sure.
Also, congratulations on not spoiling me on this. Right, you've been talking this entire time.
I'm surprised. I thought I had. Yeah.
You talked to me this entire time about like justice for Han, right, and like this whole deal. Does this mean that Jason Statham's okay because he didn't actually kill Han? Like, I mean,
that's what we're gonna. Did you watch the post credits?
Yeah.
We're gonna find the fuck out, I guess. You know, Jesus.
I mean, this is a retcon on a retcon, right?
Yep.
The first retcon is that it was Jason Statham or Deckard Shaw that killed Han. The second retcon, that didn't even happen, right? Like, not even like a real explanation. Just like Mr. Nobody made it happen. Right, like, good enough for me, I guess. Right, like, Mr. Nobody, who I guess is still missing as of the end of this movie. But yeah, this is honestly. So, what's the other part of this? We essentially get finally the full explanation of Dom's backstory. Right, like we see the moment where he goes to jail for like beating a guy's face in because it's when his father dies. And his father dies because he gets into a crash that his brother caused, but that's okay because they were in debt or something. Like, honestly, like, I get what they were trying to do, but it's not my favorite part of this movie, right? Like, is the Dom backstory. Like, I don't think young Dom and young Jacob look particularly like John Cena and Vin Diesel. And so like I don't know, it did not resonate with me as much. How did you feel about?
How did I feel? The big thing about that, I guess I feel more about the vibes
Okay,
than anything else, right? Like that is a moment in my head that runs on vibes.
okay,
Which is just that like he is a I'm sorry, I'm still searching this thing, so I'm like half focused. Okay, so just to say this for real. It's more about the emotions than the actual plot mechanics of how this happens, right? The actual
sure,
plot mechanics are Dom wants to do things by the book. Um, Jacob wants to do the risk, right? And uh, Dom's dad sided with Jacob over Dom, right? And what Dom misunderstands is he thinks that Jacob put the risk onto their dad and is the reason that their dad died, but really at the end of the day the dad is the one who basically asked for it, right?
right, yeah,
That's like the drama of it, but I don't think that that matters as much as the emotionality of like we were brothers and I blame you for this thing, right? And it deteriorated our relationship in like such a way. And I buy into that piece of it without necessarily like caring. Like I don't even think I could have explained the mechanics of how it happened if I didn't see it yesterday, but I could have told you, "Oh, um, Dom thinks that Jacob betrayed him, right? Um, and uh and he hasn't forgiven Jacob for that, right? And so yeah, I guess that's kind of where I fall on it. There's a lot of stuff in a certain sense that I would almost say lives in this kind of like vibes area, right? Based on just kind of like what I don't even know how I would like, it's almost like rule of cool, but like
yep,
rule of sincere emotionality. Does it
okay,
make sense?
yeah, no, I
You
buy
know?
that, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Like for instance, I don't super believe that Dom wouldn't, go into action at the beginning of the movie, right? When he kind of has this like denial of the call to adventure sort of thing,
right, right,
which to be fair, I hate this trope in general, right? But like I understand like the emotions of it that like Dom is like the reluctant hero being kind of called back to action. Sure, fair enough, that kind of thing.
yeah, no, that makes I buy that. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah, no, I guess I feel that. Yeah, what else? I don't know. This movie is kind of like a blur to me, just because like it's like I said, the magnet stuff I didn't like a lot, and because that's like such like it's the pivotal gadget of the movie, like previously it's been harpoon guns or whatever. That kept distracting me, and also I just like didn't like a lot of the action as much. Some of the stuff was cool, right? Like John Cena riding like a 3 mile zip line through the fucking city. It's like that zip line like just keeps going, right? Like it's fucking hilarious. In like that totally like this is stupid but a sincere way. Um,
Excuse me.
also,
Yeah.
I think you'll appreciate this. When Dom like crashes like the thing like the tower down on him and all those people, and he like falls in the water and has the out of body near death experience, my mind jumped to the Last Jedi when Rey is like exploring her past in like the cave mirror. And it's like, this kind of works, right? Like I will give it that, like it is the cheesiest scene on the fucking planet, but I think it works. And
Okay, so by the way, I do want to confirm that yes, when Han shot the three guys chasing Letty and Mia, I did cry. So
what are your
that
seven cry
happened.
moments?
The first one is realizing that Dom named his kid after Brian, which was a detail that is not unique to this movie. I had just forgotten it,
Okay.
and it just gave me feelings. Okay. Um, then when Mia showed up at the base to help track down Jacob and says that Brian is with Brian, that one just got me for some reason. I don't know. Just every time they refer to Brian as having this like perfect idyllic life in the background, just hits me. When Han showed up at the base and hugged the crew, especially Dom, I cried. Those are two cries kind of back to back. When Jacob comes back at the end to help Dom take down the bad guy, and they work together to flip the truck with their magnets, and Dom saves Jacob's life, and they're so in sync. Even though they hate each other and everything, I was just on board for all of that. When Han shows up at the family barbecue at the end of the movie and hugs the Tokyo Drift crew, that one got me. That was the time I cried last night, was that moment. It just, it's so good. And then when Dom asks little Brian if he's ready to say grace at the family barbecue, so emotional. A lot of them are about Brian. A lot of them are about a lot of them are about Han, rather.
So I have to ask, how do you feel about Brian driving up at the end of the movie? That's supposed to be Brian in the car, right? Like,
yeah, that is supposed to be Brian in the car. It's his kind of car. He drives the Japanese imports. I think it's like a Toyota or something, right? I guess I didn't cry there. Maybe I was still crying. I don't know, man. Like,
no, So I just like, how do you feel in general about it? Do you think that it was tasteful?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
All of this I think is great, right? It's sort of the opposite in my mind of what it feels like a lot of the Disney Star Wars stuff has felt like with people who are dead, like Carrie Fisher, the guy who played Admiral Tarkin, where they sort of do these
CGI recreations,
CGI faces or whatever. I don't know. The thing, it feels much more respectful, I guess, in a weird way. And there's also another angle of it, which is that like Paul Walker was young when, he died. And so giving Brian the kind of perfect life at the end of the Fast and Furious franchise, that he didn't get to have in real life feels meaningful in some way that's hard to quantify.
That makes sense. I get that. I think my kind of overall attitude towards like the kind of what has happened in this movie, right? Like, this is right. Like, I remember when this is gonna sound weird, but I remember when Super Mario Galaxy came out, right? And everybody's like, well, what else is there left to do? Right? Like, then there was Galaxy 2, which is kind of just like a direct sequel. And then they did Odyssey, which managed to top Galaxy, even though like kind of like the purported stakes aren't actually higher, right? Like, it's the same, like it's technically smaller stakes because it's like on Mario World or whatever, like the Mario Planet. That is kind of how I am thinking about Fast X, right? Like, I feel like you only like really jump the shark in retrospect, right? And so what needs to happen with like Fast, I think this is why I'm a little bit more ambivalent on Fast 9, is like, if Fast X can land this, right? Or like basically jump the shark harder and then go out on that, it will be perfect. If in retrospect 9 jumps the shark, it's going to be a disappointment, and that's kind of my big trepidation moving into the future. How do you feel about that?
That I guess I see where you're coming from. In a certain sense, I actually think the Fast and Furious franchise is a little bit immune to jumping the shark, and I think part of that comes from the ways in which it buries sort of action stakes in emotional stakes. Do you know what I mean? So for instance, this is part of what I think probably doesn't work about Fate of the Furious, right? The action states of that movie are, we need to stop Cypher from doing with this bad thing. We don't know what she's after, but it turns out she's after this nuclear submarine, right? The emotional stakes are she is blackmailing Dom to work against the team, right? And so the emotional stakes of that movie are, this is someone whom we care a lot about and we're forced to fight him. But I don't think that works, that lands as much, because to be honest, Dom doesn't he's mostly working against Cypher. He's only really fighting Cypher a little bit or fighting with Cypher a little bit in the middle. He switches sides and figures out a way to betray her pretty quickly. The thing that Fast 9 is doing is all this stuff between Dom and Jacob. Or actually, maybe a better example is Fast and Furious 6, right? It's all about Letty, right? It is about Letty. She's this amnesiac, but Dom, is hopelessly in love with her. and wants to get her back. I think those like emotional stakes land. So the movie can keep jumping the shark and doing crazy shit. They have a tank. You know, they're fighting a super terrorist. Why? Who cares, right? Because the thing that really matters is our friend Letty is in danger and we need to sort of save her. Does it make sense? And I feel like that's what works for me about F9. It's about, first of all, it's about Han on a certain level, right?
Sure.
Because there's all this stuff about Han is alive actually. Hashtag justice for Han. I'm so glad, right? But then it's also just stuff with Jacob, right? Like I really liked the moment when, like, yeah, I talked about the moment with Mia. I really liked about the moment with Mia coming and joining the crew kind of officially in a way. Because it roots that whole family. I don't know. It just like roots that whole family dynamic. And even though like what like the satellite can hack anything if they upload link this thing into, like, I don't care, you know, like I don't care about any of that. That stuff doesn't matter, right? What matters to me is that Dom is fighting his brother, but he doesn't realize that, you know, he's been holding this dumb grudge for however many years, right? And then the other thing I think is just that the action itself is so good that it rises above. This is part of why I forgive the magnets. The magnets work on a rule of cool, essentially, right? Because like one of the things that makes these movies special is how much of the stunt work is practical, right? And you know, sure, I know when they turn the dial, it's not actually a magnet, but like watching them driving down the thing and the cars are being launched at the beast, and the beast is a real thing. They made this real gigantic bus convoy things and catapulted cars into it, right? And it just kept driving. Seeing all of this stuff happen in reality is cool, right? Or like there's the moment where Dom is being chased by another car and he drives by like a silverware store basically, right? And he turns on the magnet and it pulls all this stuff out, and they have this shot where the people are standing there and this stuff flies by them out the window. That shot was practical. That was real, right? Those were real people with real knives flying out the window or whatever, right? And I think all of that stuff is what makes it work. In fact, the action scene that I'm probably least on board with is the one in the very beginning. So I kind of agree with you a little bit about like the movie kind of lost me because there is quite a lot of CGI in that like minefield chase. But, and this is crazy, the final bit where they jump onto they put the car on the rope and Dom like nails it into the tire and he swings the car, that was practical, which is insane to me.
Wait,
right?
really?
Like,
that was practical?
yeah. I mean, so it's dressed up with CGI, right? Like,
Right.
obviously, Dom doesn't actually.
Yeah, Vin Diesel's not actually in that car, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. But they really swung that car into a cliff, and then they filmed it, right? And it's like that's the stuff that I think makes you know, the action rise above, right? So I don't know. I guess that's sort of how I feel. It's sort of a two-pronged approach to how I feel about like jumping the shark in these.
no, so I think I think I largely agree with you, but I think you need to keep like, if you don't necessarily like raise kind of like the purported stakes, you have to raise the stunts, right? Like
Sure.
I do think that like if Fast 10 was just like, you know, a soft reboot of, you know, Fast and Furious 1, right? Like I don't think that would work, right? Like, I mean, I guess if it was a soft reboot, like maybe because it'd be a reboot, but like, you know, like if it was at the same
You
level,
couldn't do the thing where the street racer driving under the truck, which was the coolest stunt that they did in the first movie.
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. You absolutely could not. And I think that's what I mean, right? Like, I think Fast 10 needs to have more bombast, or at least arguably more bombastic stunts, right? Like, or at least at parity. Otherwise, I just don't think it'll work. And that's what I mean by like we will know if it has, like, because I think jumping the shark gets talked about in this kind of like a relatively objective way. And I think it's really a thing in the rearview mirror, right? Like, you could say that the series jumped the shark at like 4 or 5 or 6, right? But it keeps jumping bigger sharks, right? And so it keeps kind of, you know, elevating what the movie is, and I think that works, right? Like,
Yep.
And so I think they need to land it with 10 in order for it to work. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I think I do want to talk more about Fast 10. later. But what other things do you want to talk about this movie in particular?
Man, what other things do I want to talk about this movie in particular? One of the other things that I thought was fun, and interesting was the way in which the universe has been built up around these characters at this point. Because like I said, I feel like that is like an ingrown part of the thing. Like there's the whole part where Dom goes to visit the mom Shaw, right?
Queenie.
Deckard Shaw, yeah, Queenie, right? Yes. And like that stuff, that stuff doesn't make sense unless you have seen these other movies and you understand
Sure.
like who this character is. But I love her and that sequence just as like this little sprinkling of, oh, we're gonna be in, Edinburgh, we're looking for this thing, do you know about it, right? And here's this contact from a previous movie who matters to the story and can deliver on like this piece of the puzzle, right? And then they do this whole thing with the Lamborghini, which I really loved. I don't know why they've done this a couple of times. Like these, I guess we've gone through 3 of them now. Like dense London car chases are fun for some reason. And it's like, and that to me is maybe some of the best. This is maybe where the Fast and Furious comes alive the most in these later movies, is like accessing these pieces that like didn't necessarily exist before, but now they do. Or for instance, there's another detail that was great, which was Leo and Santos in prison, right? And he's hanging out with them. And they reveal this bit about the fuel line that like connects it in Dom's brain to what happened to his dad, right? Like there's plot relevant information, but it's being delivered by 2 characters who like were legitimate characters who existed in, 4 and 5, and I think they showed up in 7, but maybe not, right? They never really quite graduated to the main ensemble the same way that like, Roman or Tej did,
Yeah.
right? Or even Ramsey, weirdly enough. And so, like that kind of stuff. How do you feel about like, I guess this is all world building. How do you feel about the world building behind the Fast and Furious franchise?
Behind the whole franchise, I don't really know, right? Because like it feels like there's not a lot of, it feels like there's not really a lot of like world building, as it were, there, right? Like you could like, there's like shades of stuff, right? Like there's Mr. Nobody and like, Ryan, what's the CIA dude, the funny man, Ryan Reynolds, in Hobbs and Shaw.
Oh my god, I thought you meant the guy who had the broken nose
No,
from the beginning of this movie, who I love also, but
yeah, no, not him.
Jay Wiggum is the actor, but I don't remember what his name is.
Yeah, but right, this means like there's obviously like there is some super spy world building stuff, and like the world building is to your point like relatively closely contained, right? Like the world building, as such as it is about Dom's family, right? Like his adopted family, essentially. And so I think that theming is strong, but there's not a lot to build there, right? Like basically every like the most consistent point in the movies is the fucking house, which gets rebuilt at the end of this one, right? Like but like everything else just kind of like in flux as it needs to be. And the fact that like the recurring characters I think are neat, but I don't feel like and like it's fine, but it's like it's I think it's only fine mostly because like I don't care, like, because it's a kind of like a head empty movie, right? Like there's like a version of like if this were a serious movie, right? There's a version of The Complaint where like oh, it turns out like 7 people in the universe matter and they all know Dom, right? And this movie is a fun action flick, so that doesn't matter, right? Like I don't care. But I don't find the world building to be particularly compelling, I guess. I mean, I enjoy that there's a consistent through line, but like, I don't know.
I feel like the thing I'm really highlighting that I like about it is the small touches in a way
Okay.
of when these characters show up and how they show up. Which is maybe something that I don't know. I can think of another kind of movie that delivers on this sort of, because like a lot of these movies that have like that exist in greater continuities, right? Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DCEU or whatever, they go through great lengths to either acknowledge or brush over the rest of the continuity. So for instance, Ant-Man, the original Ant-Man from 2014, he has that whole thing where he goes to Avengers Mansion and he fights Falcon or whatever. And like that to me is too much, right? It is like I don't know, it's this like bombastic, heavy-handed, like
It's fan service.
Yeah, fan service, and it is a plot cul-de-sac. It takes away from, the kind of overall thing of the movie, right? Versus something like, trying to think of what's like a good example of like undershooting this, right? Maybe Aquaman is an okay example, which is a movie I like a lot, right? But it doesn't have a lot of connection to the rest of the DC EU, right? It sort of is this own self-contained story. So even though he shows up in Justice League happens, he does stuff. His trident is there, it gets broken. There's references to Mira, who's obviously also in Justice League and doing kind of some of this stuff. That's maybe a movie that is underserved by a connection to the overall sort of cinematic universe. Whereas some of my argument is that Fast 9 sort of lives in this just right place, right?
Yeah. I see what you're saying, but I think that that's only because, again, it's like a movie that we don't take super seriously, right? Like, I feel like if like I were putting on my deep art critic hat, right, and I was like mad at like Cape shit, but it was Fast and Furious movies instead, and like there's a density problem to this, right? I'd be like, like
shit.
Yeah, not shit, right? Like I'd be like, I saw it and I remembered it and I clapped, right? Like that's kind of like I think the criticism you could level at this.
Yeah.
In terms of like volume and stuff.
But so part of it, I think though, is that a lot of this stuff is like loaded emotionally, right? So for instance, the Tokyo Drift crew, they show up. Excuse me. When the Tokyo Drift crew shows up, they fulfill a plot function, right? They are there to be set up and pay off for getting Tej and Roman into space, which is a fun comedy beat that we can cut to in between our kind of like action set pieces or whatever. But there's an emotional underpin, like something emotionally underpinning them, which is that Han is alive. This is the movie that brings Han back into the fold.
Sure.
And they show up at the family barbecue and they get to hug Han. This is part of why I think actually the movie earns Han coming back to life more than a lot of other movies have earned other characters coming back to life that we thought were previously dead. Even movies that I think did it right, and did it well, do it less well than with Han, because it focuses so hard not on the raw logic of how did this happen, right, but on the raw emotion of why does this matter to our characters, right? And I care about Han coming back because I see how much it matters to Letty and Mia, right, who are people who really care about Han, right? I see how much it matters to Sean and Twinkie and the Tokyo Drift crew, because they really care about Han. And it's like, it's sort of the opposite of, like when Ant-Man fights Falcon, there isn't anything there, right? There's no emotion or drama tied up in that. It is just to service this plot detail, right? Sure. But the addition of the extra sort of level of emotionality, I think, is what makes it good and not bad, resurrecting someone from the dead. Does that make sense?
Maybe. Like I get what you're saying. I still think to me a lot of it's that, it's a movie that I don't have to like take super seriously. But I will also admit that part of this, I am sure, is that I watched Han die 4 months ago, not 10 years, right? Like,
yeah. So, oh no, there is no amount. I'm thinking about there. I've had a couple of these in my life, and they are truly transcendent experience, which is the like incredibly long reveal plot twist. So maybe the best example I can think of is the Venture Brothers. The Venture Brothers executed on a 20-year plot twist. And I'm sure we will cover the Venture Brothers not all that in the future. They're making a movie. That's the end of the show, is this movie. But there's a plot twist at the beginning of the final season of the show, because now they're doing a movie. There's a plot twist that answers this question that has been running for the entire length of the show. And that show started in 2003, right? And this came out like 2021 or 2020, right? So it is like, it's like a 20-year plot twist. And like, how many of those have there been? And how many of those can be satisfying is just an insanely limited number. Maybe actually maybe another good one is Order of the Stick. I was talking about Order of the Stick earlier, right? There is a delivery on a plot twist that was set up in 2003, also a thing from 2003, I guess, right? That has just now been like revealed to us. And it's just like, there is some extreme level of satisfaction that comes with that having had that happen, basically. And part of that is definitely like Han coming back, right? It's a little bit not quite as clean, because obviously Fast 5 and Fast and Furious 6 come out, Han is still there. These are technically the prequels, right? And then you realize that Furious 7 is the present day kind of gap or whatever. But yeah, having this guy come back to life and be added back to kind of the main cast and the main ensemble feels really good, especially because part of the other thing I really liked about Han coming back into the team is that Hobbs was in here. And in the way that I had sort of talked about how Hobbs' competing energy in Fate of the Furious brought it down, this one leans so heavily into what I was talking about with this Vin Diesel, sincerity. And Han is right on board for all of that, right? He has this whole thing with the girl, the daughter of the two Japanese scientists, who's like a plot MacGuffin or whatever. But like, that level of sort of emotionality is the kind of thing that like the Fast and Furious movies execute on. And that's part of why it felt so good for Han to kind of come back and slot into the rest of the team, because he matched the emotional tone, and he was kind of replacing someone who didn't match that emotional tone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess. Sure, I'll give it to you. I'm not as convinced, but it's a fun movie. So
you know what? I will wear you down, okay, with my
Yep, maybe you will. But I don't know. I also felt like this movie was kind of like, it felt more hollow, not in like an emotional way, because I will agree with you, the emotions here, but it felt like a lot less memorable than the other ones. And I can't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it's because you can only see like, Dom catch a person on a car so many times before it seems wrote or whatever, which is like a ridiculous sentence, but like
I get you. So something I was thinking about in terms of the stunts this time, I like the Beast, and I think that the stuff with the Beast is really sweet. Especially because, like I said, so much of it is practical. Those are real fucking cars but I kind of think that the action peaked in 6. 6 had this insane wombo combo of, number one, the F1 car, right? The F1 ramp car was such a good, I want to say the tank is the best one, because I have gushed about this tank literally in every episode since then, right? And like I said, I was all practical. That was a real tank crushing real cars, and it looks so good. It's so satisfying, right? But I think maybe the Formula One car is actually the best action in this film, or in this film franchise, right? And something about the convoy that I think doesn't work is that they sort of did this in Furious 7, right? Where there's that convoy in the Caucasus that they go and sort of like raid. And obviously it's a different, this one is one of these is in a city, the other one is in kind of the countryside or whatever. That one is technically a bus. The Beast is sort of this, I don't even know what you would call it.
It's an APC or something. I was actually going to say, I think the battle bus is a better scene. Partly because one,
really?
as like kind of like silly as to skid out and climb on the top of the bus thing is, I think that's like good. I also think like the action inside right? Like that's like Tony Jaa, right? Like that's inside the.
Oh, you're right. Yes, that's when Brian is fighting Tony Jaa with his Converses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I kind of think I agree with you.
And so like I guess maybe that's part of it, right? Is like this feel. I think you're right. I think you put the nail on it. Is they are in a city, but like like they might as well not have been, right? Like it matters like maybe for like half a minute where they're getting chased by cops for 15 seconds and they pull like the fucking power lines down on them.
So I think the magnet stuff is cool, but the magnet stuff feels different, right? Like the magnet stuff, I don't know. It's kind of like hard to explain. The magnet stuff I think is sweet, but like in a disconnected way from them going up against the beast, right? Um and I think that, and to be fair, I think this is better than some of the other stuff. For instance, I like it better than basically everything in 8. Yeah, I think I like it better than all of the action in 8, like the stuff. But I think it's just because the magnet stuff is cool, right? Flipping the cars, pulling cars. When Dom and Jacob are pulling the cars onto the beast because Jacob gets into Han's car. There's a lot of mechanics about like when Han and Mia magnetize their car to the back of the APC that has the girl in it, and then they're like fighting in like I think that stuff is kind of neat. But I don't super care about like the convoy itself. And then once it gets to the end of the action scene where Dom is in the convoy and he's like using the beast to block the missiles that are coming from Cypher, like that's kind of where it loses me, right? Because it just sort of feels like this is a worse version of the battle bus from Furious 7.
See, it as of right now, it loses me at the magnets, right? Just because like at some point it flips over from like this is a cool magnet thing to like these are magic magnets that does what the plot wants to do, and are like ipso facto they're like essentially like Deus Ex Machinas, right? Like they're whatever the plot needs them to be, and so they stop being cool to me. They just start being like the reason that the good guys win, which is fine and it looks cool, but like it can't grab me in the same way that like the tank does or the jet, like the rolling jet does, right? Like because those like have like an internal consistency to them, right? Like I like the harpoons on the jet a lot more than I like, and like like you said, the ramp cars, right? But I like the harpoons on the jet a lot more than I like the magnets, because like even if they're like not behaving the way you would expect necessarily harpoons to, like harpooning a jet to behave, they behave in kind of like an internally consistent way that I feel like the magnets don't, right? Like yeah, I like
yeah, and then it also doesn't do the thing. Furious 7 is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum to me, which is that Furious 7, the climactic scene in Los Angeles works, but the reason that works is because of these insane over the top moments that are kind of unrelated to cars, right? It is Dom brandishing the wrenches like lightsabers, right? Stomping the fucking thing and saying that dumb thing about the street and essentially earthbending, I guess, in order to like kill Shaw. It is The Rock pulling the minigun off of the helicopter and then using it to shoot the drone, right? Like that stuff is all action stuff, and it's all super cool and awesome action stuff, but it's kind of unrelated to the cars. Like the car stuff isn't what makes this cool. Well, you can tell in F9, right? Part of what is built to be cool about this action scene is that they're doing car shit again, right? This is car stuff.
right.
And so in a way I sort of there's like a thin dividing line between the way those two kind of like do their climaxes.
Yep, I think I buy that. I think I'm okay with that.
Okay, are the magnets better or worse than the bank vault from 5? I guess obviously.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking. I think the magnets are worse because even though the bank vault shouldn't work like that, it feels like it works consistently to itself. Whereas the magnets really do feel like plot magic.
Okay.
And like there's also
I honestly think the magnets might be better if they didn't do the thing with the wires at the very end. Because the thing is, they've been going through this whole city the whole time. The magnets don't pull down any wires. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are no power cables 20 feet in the air that the magnets will grip and pull down. I don't know.
So I can maybe like sketch out what it would take to make the magnets less bad for me, which is like have some legibility to like what turning the dial does, right? Like it feels like they just the magnets have like two settings, attract and repulse, with no like variability to it. It feels like they crank it all the way. It would make it would make sense to me if like the silverware worked, if that only happened when they cranked it all the way, right? Like, or something like that. And like if they didn't pull the car from like through a building, if like the car was actually next to them, right? Like if they kept it like that level of reasonable, I think I'd be more on board with it. And maybe like, have a moment where like, it also kind of like works against them in a real way, right? Where like, like I don't know, you have Roman early in the film turn the magnet too hard and like it causes an issue, right? Like, and that'd do it for me.
Or you have something like they go to the cars and then Tej says, "Okay, but I got to warn you, these cars are all made out of all aluminum because you wouldn't be able to make a car out of steel, which means we're going to be extra vulnerable to bullets," or some shit like that. You know what I mean? I see what you're saying. You could sort of justify in the plot how some of this works and give it real push and pull in kind of a mechanical sense.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like even though the bank vault like didn't have a ton of that, it had some of it, right? Like it's crashing into things, it's slowing them down. Dom has to make his last step. And on top of that, it's part of like a clever switcheroo, right? Like, in this movie, the magnets just kind of like do what we need them to do. And like, that's that, right? Like they feel literally like just like kind of like, Deus Ex Machina, like I said. And that's I think kind of what bothers me the most about them, and why I kind of like dismiss them and why I don't like them, right? Like, and I feel like we're talking a lot about this, but I also feel like there's just like not a lot else to hang my hat on in this movie, right? Like there are cool moments, right? Like launching Tej and Roman into space, very fun, right? But like, it feels like it kind of like drifts between things rather quickly, and it doesn't feel like there's a lot like to latch onto when you're other than like like you said the Han stuff, but like it feels like it goes from A to B to C relatively quickly, and it doesn't feel soulful. Maybe that's the wrong way to put it. It's just I don't know. The movie feels,
it definitely has a lot of momentum. Yeah. I'm on board with that. But I also feel like these movies kind of have to have a lot of momentum, sure. Otherwise you will think too hard about
that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I buy that.
Like, where is Little Nobody? They made such a big deal of him in the last movie, and then I guess they were like, you know what? Let's cut him out of this one. We're not going to care too much about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, but like, part of that is why like I feel like I don't have a ton to say about the movie, right? Like,
okay,
like the movie to me is like a John Cena, right? And not in a bad way. Just kind of like that's the most memorable thing about the movie to me is that John Cena is here. Right, like, and that's
I do want to say one thing which I really appreciate, which is that John Cena as Jacob adds a level of weird backwards compatible believability to the series when he retroactively justifies why Mr. Nobody shows up in Furious 7, right? Because technically he did show up for a reason. It was like justified, but it's very shaky in Furious 7, right? But now that you know that actually, Dom's younger brother was working for Mr. Nobody this whole time, it all of a sudden recontextualizes a lot of the kind of dumb, weird shit that happens in that movie around Mr. Nobody. That's like, wait, I'm sorry. Why does he say, like, this stuff? You don't know Dominic Toretto. Why? Well, it's like, oh, he understands because of X, Y, and Z, right? Because of Han, because of his brother, etc.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I feel all that. I also think that like the thing that popped to my mind is like, oh, this is like weird petty bullshit because The Rock Vin Diesel hates The Rock now. He gets the other WWE actor, right? Like I feel like if this had kept going,
but I do want to say I think John Cena does a great job. I was surprised at how well I like John Cena in this movie because I think John Cena has I don't know, he just has a presence that's quite a lot like The Rock, and I don't love that for him. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think so. John Cena, like I think it works because he's like the villain for like 90% of the movie, right? Like in the alternate universe where like, John Cena was Luke Hobbs and The Rock comes in at this movie, right? Like I feel like John Cena and Vin Diesel have the same falling out because like, John Cena doesn't have time to, has enough time to like see himself become the villain, right? Like at least in terms of like the attention grabbing stuff. Although maybe not. Like I don't know. I have not heard the same things about John Cena in terms of like behind the scenes nonsense. Just some stuff about like pandering to the CCP, but that's basically it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited for where things go in Fast X because now that's it. That's all that's left. We don't know what's happening next, right? Are you seeing it on Thursday?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm working from home specifically so I can go see this movie.
I almost was going to quit right, but I decided not to. I took a later showing, so I'm seeing it at 9:45 at night.
Okay.
Instead of at
Yeah. Since we read at 9:30 my time, I am going to see it at like 5 or so, right? Like early enough. That I actually like leave directly from like at the end of my work day. I have to like drive straight to the theater, but predictions for like I said, nothing is sacred to me. Now that Han's back, I have some wild predictions about Fast X.
Okay, let's go. Let's hit them.
So I think I'll start. Like I think everybody is going to be in this movie, right? Like I think that they're gonna at least in one of these 3 upcoming movies, right? Everybody's gonna show up. I think at least once. I think my wildest prediction is that I think Brian's gonna show up. Like I think, that is kind of why I asked you how you felt about it. Like
that would be wild. I would
there's
not like that, but
there's a part of me that thinks that there are 3 movies to this series because Vin Diesel wants AI technology to get far enough out that like when Brian comes back in the 3rd movie that it won't be as weird, right? Like that is like this is my like my prediction, right? Like I don't feel great about it, but I think it's gonna happen, right? Like I think Vin Diesel would like resurrect Paul Walker if he could to be in this movie. Like that's the energy I get out of Vin Diesel. But that is my wildest prediction. Oh, hello, Orion.
Yeah, he's coming to hang out. That's your wildest prediction. Okay, okay, I get that. I feel bad because I've been looking at some of this stuff, so I know some things, but I won't talk about anything that I have kind of like awareness of.
The only thing I know is that Luke Hobbs is back because it got pushed to me. I've been searching enough Fast and Furious.
Okay, that was the other thing. Is that I also heard that. Oh my God, Orion, please. Oh my God, he's just on the keyboard. You know what? We're still recording, so
yeah,
I guess it's okay. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Hobbs comes back into it because one of the things that I actually liked about the post credits thing is the idea that Han is back and he is confronting Shaw because I think Han and Shaw have really great like the kind of energy that I was complaining about a little bit in the last thing where they're a little too similar. Han being very subtle and subdued, right? Compared to Shaw, who is more braggadocious and like, I don't know, I don't even know how I'd say this. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how I would quantify it. It just feels like they have a very opposite energy, which I'm excited about because I think that a team up. It's sort of like how Roman and Tej have a lot of like chemistry and like pair up well. I feel like Shaw and Han would pair up amazingly, and I want to see that so bad. What else do I think? I don't think there's any world where Giselle comes back.
So
maybe Luke Evans. I think maybe Owen Shaw is back in this one.
Yeah, I think everybody will have a cameo, even like maybe just in a flashback, right? Like, but I think everyone will have a cameo at the very least, up to and including like, I mean, except for maybe the people like, except the only person I could see not having a cameo is Idris Elba. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, like I assume one of these movies is going to tie up the Hobbs and Shaw like plot line. Um, like I am sure who is ever running ENO or whatever the fuck that's called, um, is going to be a plot point. My guess is either it is Cypher or somebody related to Cypher in that way, right? Like,
Yeah, because there are two new characters in the movie, Jason Momoa and Brie Larson, right? Like these are the two new headliners who are in. But basically everybody else is also right. So Cypher comes back, um, Shaw comes back, Hobbs is back. It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know who I think is gonna. I think maybe they're building up Cypher as sort of this final boss villain, right? She kind of ends up in the in like the twist in the third act, you know, like the one who encourages Jacob, or I'm sorry, Otto to betray Jacob. Otto is the sort of like dumb villain, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
Jacob is like the, you know, the emotional villain. I feel like Cypher might have a similar relationship with in this one, right? Where Jason Momoa is kind of the forward facing, you know, villain, but that um Cypher will kind of be behind
Oh
it.
yeah, I fully
Uh,
expect Jason Momoa to have turned to the good guys by the end of the movie, right? Like, if you're big and muscly, you are a good guy at heart. Is like the real message of the Fast and Furious films, right? Like, big strong man, good. Um, you know, and
yeah, true.
um,
Honestly, you know what? Here's the crazy thing. Never gonna happen in a million years, but I will say it because it could. Okay. I think the craziest thing they could do is at the very end of the movie, a yellow Camaro shows up. Okay. No one's driving it. And like Dom looks and is like, what is this? And then that Camaro turns into Bumblebee because
Jesus
the
fucking Christ.
Transformers movies and the Fast and Furious movies are both owned by Universal. Okay. And but that to me, that would be the craziest thing to ever happen, right? To have the Fast and Furious car movies also cross over with the Transformers car movies.
I don't think like I just,
What are the odds that you would give me on that? What would you pay out if I were to put in $1 and that were to happen?
1,000. Like, there's no like
Yeah, it's just no way, right?
the only way that happens is if like they make Brian's kid play like unless they like kind of like they loop it somehow, right? That like because it's just it is weirdly it's not the idea of a Transformer showing up in the movie. It's the fact that this means that Transformers movies have been happening in the background and nobody's talking about it, right?
Yeah,
Like
yep.
that's the part that
Yeah,
makes me think it can't happen, not anything else. Um, other
yeah. I mean, there is a Transformers movie coming out in a couple
the
months,
Beast
right?
Wars movies, yeah.
The Beast Wars movie. I don't know if we're gonna talk about it in the podcast, but I'm definitely going to see it because I
I
loved Beast Wars when I was a kid.
I don't know what's happening in the Transformers continuity, and frankly, I don't fucking care. Right? Like
You know what? To be completely honest with you, I feel you, and I sort of feel like I am vindicated a little on the Transformers movies because they did Bumblebee, didn't do great. And then this one's tracking pretty poorly, or and it just sort of looks like there was some special weird fucking magic to these Michael Bay Transformers movies. And I have always died on that hill that those movies are not they're I mean, they're not good, right? But they're not bad in the way that people say they are. They kind of had this like lightning rod, you know, of hatred from the internet, but real bad movies are forgettable. And I feel like that's what Bumblebee is, and it kind of seems like that's what this Rise of the Beast is going to end up sort of like, you know, it's sort of going to end up being. And weirdly, in the test of time, it's going to be the Michael Bay Transformers movie that are going to be fondly remembered because, you know, I don't know, he was just a weird, crazy
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of
action visionary.
bombast,
Who
right?
knows?
Like,
Yeah.
who else would put fucking robot testicles in a movie, right? Like that's
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like that's the stuff that we remember. But like, I actually think that the action in those movies is remarkably kind of better than they're given credit for in a weird way. Um, I don't know. I was watching just some clips of the fights themselves on YouTube the other day because what this is when I formulated this theory. I was like, let me just like look. And I just like watched some of these, like these scenes play out. And I kind of forgot how weirdly well choreographed for robot fighting movies. The especially the later films would end up kind of being.
I just had the worst thought. Like, what if your prediction comes true and they bring back Brian as a transformer?
Oh, gross. Okay. You know
Yeah.
what? We'll end on that. Cursed thought.
Cursed,
Cursed thought.
extremely cursed.
How was your week? Tell me all about it. What have you been up to, bud?
My week's been pretty decent. What did I do this week? So couple things that I did games wise. Um, I've been playing a lot of Marvel Snap. That's just kind of like my standard kind of like turlet game. But I played in the Diablo 4 server smash or whatever, but only for a couple hours. Because I was away and then I got back in time to do it. Um, I tried out the Druid. Druid's kind of neat. Not gonna be. I think I'm gonna start with a Barb when D4 comes out in like the 4 weeks it comes out.
I feel like I have to start out with a barbarian. I'm always a barbarian in Diablo games.
Yeah, I mean, I have tried every class except for the Necromancer, and like minion class is always kind of like my second character, or like my third. Like the thing I do once in a while after I'm more comfortable with the game. But I think I'm definitely doing Barb just because like it feels good, right? Like I played the barbarian in the first in the first beta, and it was super fun.
Yep.
So what else?
Yeah, I had intended to play this beta, but I did not end up doing it for dumb reasons. So
Fair enough. What else can I talk about? I got the new Zelda game, Tears of the Kingdom. And I was initially not, and then I kind of like I saw some memes about it, and I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Nintendo does good stuff, and I'm pretty well hooked. I was not super hyped for this game, but like they drop you in, and there's just so much like there's a joy to kind of like being able to like stick stuff together in the way the game lets you do. That's like, like I almost want to say it's like Skyrim meets Minecraft, but that's not quite right. But it's kind of like it got shades of that, right? Like I will explain this puzzle that I did yesterday that really like got me and really like hooked me in, right? So there are these mine carts, like so the powers. I'm very early on in the game, but the powers you get are like you can pick stuff up and move it around, right? There are these mine carts that like you can ride them along mine tracks. And you can get these fans, and there Lou in the chat says I'm still sitting here reeling over the cursed thought. So, um, but anyway, so one of the mechanics in the game is beyond these things is there are like these like machines from like this precursor race, and like one of the first one you get is a fan, and you can hit the fan and it will blow and it will push you along whatever you're doing, right? And so like one of these early puzzles is you put the fan on the cart and you blow the cart along the tracks, and that's how you move to like the next area. There's this optional puzzle where there's these tracks leading up to this other thing. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I put it together and I go on the cart. And then I realize, much to my chagrin, that there's like a hole in the track, right? And so I fall off the edge of the world and I go back. It's like, I'm staring at it. How do I do this? It's like, there are like 6 carts laying around. Can I just like shove 3 or 4 carts together and have it like, because only one half of the tracks has a hole, like the other track is working. And so I'm like, can I shove all 3 of these together and put a fan on it and get across? That also doesn't work. I go plummeting to my death. There are also these hooks lying around. So I'm like, this is what I will do. And I put the hook on the unbroken rail and I put a fan on the bottom. And okay, the hook is too light. The fan just like pushes it and it spins instead of like riding along the track, right? Then I try to attach a log to it and ride the log, but that's just not working. Finally, I take the minecart, I stick the bottom of the minecart onto the hook. I hook the hook on the track, I put the fan on the back of the cart, I push it along, and I get the other end. I'm like, I'm a fucking genius. Obviously, this took me 3 times longer than it should have, but it felt so fucking good. I love this fucking game. I'm hooked. I've been playing it for a handful of hours now, so I can't go into like, I don't know the deeper stuff, or I think that sometimes the danger with these types of games is at a certain point you will you'll out power level what you're doing, but that's I've been having a blast with it. Yeah. I've got a couple other things, but I'm going to hand the mic over to you, buddy. How's your week been going?
Oh man, I got a bunch of stuff. Well, so the big thing that I was doing was playing Chorfs finally. Chaos Dwarves for Total War, which I got to be honest is some of the best Total War I've played in my entire fucking life. Holy fuck, do I love Chorfs. The thing that's interesting about Chorfs is most of the most of the way the factions work in Total War is you sort of have order factions, you have chaos factions, right? But then you have a couple of other like aligned factions, right? Like you sort of have the like Skaven, for instance. They're not chaos aligned, but they're like evil, right? Or you might have the undead who aren't chaos aligned, but they're evil, that kind of thing. And one of the things that's interesting but also kind of frustrating about the game is that most of the order races play kind of similarly, and most of the chaos races play kind of similarly, right? So, for instance, in the Empire, you are trying to take land, build it up, control it. You make a functioning economy. You're trading with other order factions, right? That's like the kind of core gameplay, and that's pretty similar for high elves. It's pretty similar for lizardmen. It's pretty similar for Bretonia, right? These are all kind of the good aligned races, right? And they all have the kind of the same like game plan, right? Whereas the Greenskins and the Skaven have pretty similar construction, right? Where their settlements are not great, they're kind of crappy. It's hard to turn them into powerhouses, right? And they don't really do trade or anything like that. They're mostly built on raiding and sacking and pillaging, right? This is also true of like chaos. This is also true of like undead, right? The interesting thing about Chaos Dwarves is Chaos Dwarves are these like insane industrialists, right? Like they are the perfect evil like Captain Planet industrialist faction, basically, right? They're slavers, right? Which is also true about Dark Elves. To be fair, Dark Elves are kind of a little bit of an anomaly. Which is sort of nice. Like Dark Elves are an evil faction that you can play that actually does grow a really strong economy, and they grow that on the backs of slaves, right? Chaos Dwarves do a very similar thing, but Chaos Dwarves are built more on their industrial core than Dark Elves are, which makes them actually like different and more satisfying to play, because Chaos Dwarves are like this dark inversion of that typical order mindset, right? Where I'm trying to do the same thing, right? I'm trying to invest a lot into my provinces, into making these like really strong, powerful provinces. But what you're doing with Chaos Dwarves is you're building outposts and factories and towers, right? And so the thing with an outpost is outposts use labor to mine raw materials, right? Factories take raw materials and then turn them into armaments, right? Which is like guns and stuff like that. And then you take those armaments and you do stuff with them. And then there's did you ever play Cathay when you played Warhammer 3?
No.
Cathay has a thing called trade caravans, which is a whole subsystem that allows you to send trade caravans from Cathay out into the old world, right? So you can send a trade caravan to Altdorf, for instance. You can send a trade caravan to God, I don't know what some of the like Kislev, for instance, right? Chaos Dwarves have the evil version of it, right? They have what are called convoys. And with convoys, you can send trade caravans where you're trading gold, but you're trading for these resources, right? So for instance, if you want slaves, well, you can send a trade caravan or convoy. You can send a convoy where you trade guns to the Dark Elves for slaves, for labor. It's called labor. It's not called slaves by the Chaos Dwarfs or whatever. You can send gold to the ogres and they will give you raw materials, right? And the interplay between all of these is just like so complex, but like also compelling. I feels like I'm playing the Lex Luthor version of the dwarves in a way, which is the perfect feeling for what these should be like, right? In the with the dwarves, you're trying to build this like strong, this like strong economy. You're building up your provinces. You're generating money, sort of like hand over fist, and getting these really powerful kind of like artillery units. Well, you're doing all the same stuff with the Chaos Dwarves. You're just taking slaves to do it, right? You're using hobgoblins, which are sort of like goblins, but it's like the special Chaos Dwarf version of goblins. You're using hobgoblins as your kind of meat shields in your armies because you need someone to hold them in place so that you can bombard your crazy chaos powered artillery into the right locations. And just God, it feels so good. It is so fun playing these Chaos Dwarves. So that was a big part. That was a big part of what I was doing. I was also playing a lot of Hearthstone. I'm trying to make, as always, I don't know. I'm very Hearthstone pilled right now. I'm trying to make Menagerie War. I ended up going on a really insane winning streak, getting into Diamond with a version of Menagerie Warrior. Menagerie Warrior being the trying to play as many different creature types as possible. I may have cracked the code. I got a pretty good list that was doing pretty well. I don't know. I could take a look at some of these stats. What was I playing? Yeah, I went on a 19. So in one version of Warrior, I went 17-2 over 19 games. That was my huge climb. I would just like went absolutely apeshit with this warrior deck. And then I modified it, and that one I went 7-5. But I'm now in Diamond. I've been kind of fucking around doing other stuff. I found an interesting Enrage Warrior that I went 5-2 with. That was pretty fun. And then I was just kind of like mucking around with some of the other classes to like clear to sort of clear quests. I actually really like this meta. I think this is some good metas. And on Thursday, their balance changes coming. Okay. We don't know what's in them yet. We don't know what's in those balance changes, but when they do balance changes now in Hearthstone, what they do is they say balance changes on Thursday. They say these cards are getting buffed, these cards are getting nerfed. And in the getting buffed section, they have From the Depths, right? Which is, if you will remember from the Derpies last year, the card that got nerfed in the worst patch of all time that made Control Warrior this garbage deck, basically. They are buffing From the Depths again. And I just hope to God they are reverting the From the Depths nerf, because if they give me that card back, I'm pretty sure Control Warrior is gonna get. I want it so bad. They might do some other stuff. People are thinking that they will buff From the Depths by bringing the mana cost down, but they will also change the effect a little bit. Right now it says you look at the bottom 5 cards of your library, you reduce the cost of all of those cards by 5, and then you pull one of them, bring it to the top of the deck. What might end up happening is they say, okay, well, this is now a 3-mana spell again, but it only reduces the mana cost by 2 instead of by 3, that kind of a thing. Which, if they make that change, kind of fair enough. I would get it. I would understand. Hearthstone right now is weirdly being terrorized by a super high win rate deck that nobody is playing. Unholy DH is broke. I'm sorry, Unholy Demon Death Knight, not Demon Hunter, is broken to an insane degree. Just this ability to flood the board with stats, reload really efficient, kind of keep generating threats over and over and over again. Weirdly, absolutely farming aggressive decks. This is kind of not super true. A lot of the time, these aggressive decks are kind of duke it out with one another, and they have kind of like strengths and weaknesses. Typically, you want an aggressive deck to be the best deck in the metagame. But the thing that's so impressive about Unholy is that it is definitively the best. it actually does kind of poorly against the control matchups. But it just absolutely dumpsters these aggressive and mid-range matchups where it can seize the board and take initiative, never kind of let go. So that one's getting nerfed, but weirdly the format just doesn't care. I don't know what it is. On one of the top end podcasts, there's a podcast called the Vicious Syndicate podcast for Hearthstone, where data from the top 1,000, top 100 of legend players is kind of getting like filtered, and people talk about this a lot. The interesting thing is nobody's playing this Unholy Death Knight deck. It has the most bonkers win rate we've probably seen in a long time. But I guess, I don't know, the deck is just too simple. It's too straightforward to play. For some reason, people have kind of been playing other decks, which has created a metagame where actually the format seems more balanced than it is. It's just that nobody really wants to just like downright win with a pretty straightforward swarmy Unholy Death Knight deck. So yeah, according to an ad I saw online, you may be entitled to compensation for reasons, loot boxes, whatever. Yeah, I did hear about that. It is a exceptionally stupid class action lawsuit that I saw.
There's another one I think for Steam as well. There's been, I think there's a couple, like there's a law firm that's like trying to get something going around kind of like the e-commerce stuff in the game space. I don't know. I don't trust any of that. Just not because like there might be a case, but I'm also pretty sure that like if you sign up for one of those, like I'm gonna lose my Steam account, right? Like I don't want to risk that, right? Like,
yeah.
But if you think you might have a case, talk to a qualified lawyer, not to us.
True. Interestingly enough, and question for you: did you watch Guardians 3 yet?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
I have not had the time. I went down to New Jersey to visit my mom for Mother's Day. In a call back to, I'm sure, one of our alternate universe, some Derps talk about games or some Derps talk about food podcasts. I went to a place in Newark that I know we've talked about. I don't know if we've talked about it on the cast. Fornos of Spain.
Yep.
Which is excellent. I recommend it to anybody in the Newark.
That is weirdly right by my dad. Probably lives maybe like a quarter mile from there.
Okay.
Half mile from there, because he lives in the Ironbound district now.
Yeah. Very cool. But yeah. What else? So one other thing I wanted to call out is on YouTube. Are you familiar with Auntie Donna?
Nope.
Auntie Donna. They are like a comedy group. They have a thing on Netflix. They're also and they have a YouTube channel. They also have a thing. They're Australian. They're an Australian comedy trio. But they are also part of this thing called Grouse House, which is like I think a slightly larger comedy collective. But there is this relatively newish web series. It's got 2 episodes right now. It's called like, let me get the name of this. Like the worst game in the worst game show ever or something like that. Let me see if I can find this real quick. The most upsetting guessing game. So, so the most upsetting guessing game, the way it works is you have a bunch of people, or you have essentially a host and 3 or 4 contestants, and the host just kind of like facilitates. But the contestants, there is one who play it's an improv game, and the setup is that one of the players is hosting a party, and he has to guess what the other 3 players are, the characters they are playing. But they are playing extremely convoluted and hard to guess characters. And this is hilarious because it's like about halfway through the episode, they just start screaming at each other. Like you get to that point where it's like, we want to be done with this and we need you to guess the answer, right? So they start getting like more obvious with their clues. But like the first episode, which I have to like, to just give you an idea, one of the characters, one of their kind of like aspects was like body is made of friendly snakes, right? Like that one's relatively easy to guess, right? But like one of the characters, his character was, he is doing a very obvious pantomime, but every time the guesser guesses it correctly, he says no and then changes it to something else that's very obvious. And one of his other things is every 3 or 4 times that happens, he goes over to the the host of the game and like mutters about recasting the party host, having to reshoot the thing, but it's just part of the game. But like the woman who's playing the party host doesn't know that, right? And is kind of like starting to have like a minor mental breakdown in the middle of the show. And is getting very upset. And so they have to like be like, what is he doing? Right? Like, guess, right? Like, and it's just so fucking hilarious, right? Like I am dying. Like it's clear that these people are like making themselves miserable over the course of like this 40 minutes, but it is so funny that like I was dying laughing watching it. So I cannot recommend that highly enough. That's the only kind of viewed media that I think I want to promote this week.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching The Boys again. I'm trying to get through the next season. I've also been trying to watch Barry. Barry has been hard. Barry season 3 is a rough one. Barry season 2 was fun because like it was still kind of funny in like a dark comedy slapstick way. But Barry season 3 is just like really hitting you with that like, this is a really fucked up guy, and I'm just like, hey, yikes, sort of way, right? Which is interesting. I think of myself as a guy who likes that stuff. But it's easier when it's like, Saul Goodman, for instance. Saul Goodman, like Saul is a fundamentally like sympathetic, maybe is the question, like character, because like he's a bad guy. He's selfish, right? And his selfishness fucks his entire life up, according to this show, essentially. Obviously no spoilers for the final season. I don't think you that, but
not yet, no.
But my thing with Saul is an addict, right? He is addicted to his selfishness. He is addicted to his bad behavior, right? And you watch him, go cold turkey, and then you watch him relapse. And there's something compelling about that, in a way where I can recognize he's a bad guy, but I have a lot of sympathy for him, and I find him like really interesting to watch. The kinds of things that Barry ends up doing, again, no spoilers, are the kinds of things that I am just like, oh my god. And I don't know, it's just hard. It's just real hard to watch. But I want to, because we're in Barry season 4 now, and and it's the final season, and I want to see how it ends, because I've said Barry is very, very good. So I don't know. I'll try and get back through it. For some reason, I went to The Boys off of that, of all things, just because I had never seen season 3, and like a clip popped up on YouTube, and I was just like, you know what? I'll just get it over with. Let's go. And so I've been watching back the whole thing, and once again, I think it is a no thoughts, head empty show, but I have realized why it is, and the reason why it is actually. And it's ironically enough, it is because of the same principle as Magnet, right? Which is that the show is sort of unrealistic, morally speaking. The Boys is such a cynical take on superheroes and like the world, right? That it actually kind of beggars belief. Like it is an unbelievably evil show in a sense. And I think it's funny because The Boys is kind of coming at you from this perspective of this is what superheroes would really be like. But I don't think that's true. I don't think that's the case. I don't think it makes a good case for that. And I think a lot of the supporting details about The Boys, you've seen it, right?
I have not seen season 3. I think we stopped.
Okay, I have also not seen season 3 yet. But like, so for instance, the fact that Vought is able to hide for half a century that they have been chemically dosing babies to give them superpowers is mind-bogglingly unrealistic, right? Because you see with Starlight and her mom, right, where her mom understands exactly what happens and the decisions that get made, because they're masking Compound V as a polio vaccine, right? It's like, are you really telling me that nobody ever spoke up about this? Like, it is, you have to be so fundamentally like black-pilled on the human race in order to sell that. And I do think that it is internally consistent to the world of The Boys is precisely that evil and that cynical, right? But it fundamentally loses me. This is why I think The Boys is about nothing. The Boys isn't making any real points it doesn't have anything on its. It's very compelling television, and I'm weirdly liking it more the second time around. Just I think because I stopped expecting things of The Boys. The Boys is a C student, and that's fine for me, right? You know, you don't have to be in the honors. You don't have to pretend to be as good as good television. You can just be fine television. But yeah, it's that stuff that is just like getting on my not even on my nerves. It's not on my nerves, but when it comes to The Boys. The final thing I want to talk about, though, which I am excited about, have you heard of a program called, I want to make sure I get this right, Tailspire? Tailspire.
No.
You can go ahead and take a quick fucking look. This is the coolest shit. Yeah, like a fairy tale spire. One word. It is a Steam thing that is in early access, but Tailspire is this program that lets you build dungeons and like put guys in there or whatever. But it's basically just like almost like Unity but or maybe like not Unity, maybe like RPG Maker is a good comparison. So basically what it allows you to do is you get to like make your maps, and the idea is that and it's just this like custom creation tool, right? And the idea is that you host your D&D game inside of Tailspire. There's all these models, right? You can build towers, you can build inns, you can build camps, you can build maps or whatever. But this shit is the coolest thing, okay? Basically, at a weird twist of fate, I like had a not even a real pitch.
I am embarrassed. I backed this on Kickstarter, and I totally forgot about it.
Well, we're gonna learn if it's cool. Yeah. So basically, I'm playing a new D&D 5e game. This came about because the other day I was talking to Rachel. I was talking to Rachel about the backstory of one of my characters. So Maznar Cliffgrove, Mountaineer of Casmodan, is my dwarven hunter in World of Warcraft, and Cliffgrove's backstory is that he's the member of a dwarven tank crew, right? So if you remember in Warcraft 3, there are like dwarven siege engines, these siege tanks. In the Alliance military, it's like one of the units that they can build. The Cliffgrove is the gunner of this tank crew, and his backstory is that he got kind of trapped behind the Scourge lines, right? So when Arthas returns from Northrend with Frostmourne, he kills his dad, he unleashes the Scourge over Lordaeron, creates plague lands, eventually goes up into Quel'Thalas and does all that. There's this dwarven tank crew, and they are alone and cut off from any support structure, and they are just trying their best to escape from behind the Scourge line. And I remember, and I was pitching, and I said to Rachel, I was like, I think this would make a really fun D&D campaign, right? You know, the idea that you are kind of constantly surrounded by the undead, and all you have is this tank, and the tank is powerful, but you need to support it in a bunch of different ways. And so we're doing that. We're running with the Warcraft 5th edition compendium, which itself is an insane like homebrew. It's a 430 page PDF that like maps kind of Warcraft lore and the Warcraft universe onto D&D 5th edition rules, which is pretty neat, which is pretty interesting. I am playing Cliffgrove, the nominal Cliffgrove. But I'm playing with a couple of our friends from the guild, right? One of whom is going to be playing a dwarven mountain king, who is the tank commander, whom is priest, and the other is going to be playing a high elf spellbreaker, which I think is just like the perfect setup for like a D&D, crew, right? So I'm very excited about that. But Tailspire is the thing that we are using for. And the absolutely crazy thing that is nuts about Tailspire is it has the ability to, one, import Hero Forge minis, right? Hero Forge being a custom, website that allows you to make a custom mini, and then you get it 3D printed, they'll ship it to you, sort of thing. But you can also get like a digital download of it. So that's the thing. Tailspire can take those and put them in its game engine, which is nuts. But the other thing you can do is you can add your own models. And so something that Rachel has been doing.
Buddy,
I did not. I mentioned. What are you talking about? I mentioned you. I said a human priest. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm talking to Lou in the chat. Lou says this campaign has 4 characters. Buddy mentioned 3. I absolutely did not. I mentioned a dwarven mountain king. I mentioned me. I mentioned a human priest, and I mentioned I have spellbreaker. That's 4. Those are 4 people. Okay.
Who is running the game?
Rachel.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, in her DM intro. But anyway, yeah. So she's importing. She ripped the models from Warcraft 3 Reforged. The siege tank model that exists in Warcraft 3 Reforged. And it is now in Tailspire, which is insane and super cool. And I'm freaking out about it. So I want to. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. It is just. I don't know. There's something about it that like glued me. I was like, we have to do Tailspire. This thing looks incredible. I want to do this so fucking bad. And we'll see how it goes, I guess. Yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Well, we're at about time, and we've got raid to get to. So
we have got raid to get to.
I will say, if you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at subversivegames@gmail.com or podcast@subversivegames.com. You can reach us at twitch.tv/subversivegames, or you can watch us live at twitch.tv/subversivegames or youtube.com/subversivegames. We've rate review us where you find podcasts. We've got all the links down in the description. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
No, I have nothing I'm looking to promote.
Well, with that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.